Hi, folks. This is Abel James, and thanks so much for listening to the Fat Burning Man Show, where we talk about real food and real results. Now, you guys have been asking for this guest for quite some time. His name is Rich Roll. He's one of the most popular podcasters out there in the health space. We always see him up there competing with Jillian Michaels as well, which is totally cool. So we talk about that on the show a little bit. He's also one of the top 25 fittest men out there, and he's an endurance athlete who follows an entirely plant-based diet. So we're going to be talking about vegans versus paleo and all that fun stuff too. So stay tuned for the show. A couple of quick announcements before we get there. I've been asked to speak at the New Media Expo in Vegas in January. So if you're going to be there, I'm actually going to be talking about podcasting. So come say hi, pick my brain about this stuff. If you're in the area, maybe you should check it out. I would love to see you and meet you in person. What else we got? I wanted to also give a very special thanks to all of you who have pitched in to support the show. As you know, we're all listener supported here at the FBM team to get the show out to you. And a lot of people have really stepped up to contribute as supporting members, which is $9 a month, or donated over $50, and some people even over $100, which is totally wild. And I really appreciate it. And the rest of the team here does as well. So I wanted to give a special thanks before we get to the show to Catherine, Keith, Angela, Taylor, Trident, Peter, Stephen, and Sean. Thank you so much for helping support the show. We're going to be ramping it up a little bit in terms of quality in the next few weeks and months. So stay tuned for that. We're going to get some really cool guests, but stay true to the heart of the show and hopefully up the production quality a little bit. So if you'd like to support the show and you haven't yet had the chance, head on over to fatburningman.com/donate. And even if you donate as little as $1, every little bit helps. I'll send you a couple of my books for free. So thank you so much in advance. But if you don't want to donate and you just want to support the show, we always really appreciate your reviews over at iTunes for the Fat Burning Man Show. We're over 600 5-star reviews last time I checked, which is totally cool, but it always helps to get that steady flow of reviews from you guys and feedback from you guys so that we can make sure we're making exactly the show that you want, that helps you out and helps you reach your goals. So easiest way to do that is just go straight into iTunes and leave a review for the Fat Burning Man Show. Really appreciate it. All right, so on to the show with Rich. We talk about how to stick to your nutrition plan, however strict it may or may not be when you're eating out or going to a friend's house, what alcoholism can teach us about food addiction, why we're all obsessed with bacon, except for probably vegans, and why paleo people and vegans should stop bickering. All right, let's go hang out with Rich. All right, folks, today I'm really excited to be here with Rich Roll. At the ripe age of 40, Rich rejected the norms of a middle-aged sedentary lifestyle and became one of Men's Fitness magazine's top 25 fittest men, while making a name for himself in the Ultraman competitions. The kicker is that he's done all this while maintaining a vegan lifestyle. How's it going, Rich?
Good, man. Thanks for having me, Abel.
Yeah, of course. I know we've been trying to get on the horn for a while now. I'm really glad that you're here. It's super fun. And whenever I look at the podcast charts for the top 10, it's always like you and me and Jillian Michaels kicking around there somewhere. But
we should join forces so we can finally dethrone her. But I think all the time because I'm checking the things and I'm like, Abel is up there again. Congrats on the podcast. You're rocking it, man. It's very cool.
Hey, you too, man. It's like I love this because so many of us know each other, mm-hmm. and it's really cool because it's like co-opetition is what I heard it called, and I really like that. Yeah.
I mean, I think that the pie is huge. We're not competing against each other. And I love the idea of, going on each other's shows, and hopefully you'll come on my show and let's all help each other build our audience, because the truth of the matter is, we're in a huge healthcare crisis and there's a lot of people that need help. And so the more, people like yourself that are out there, trying to put out a healthy message and turn people's lives around, like I'm all for that. And I'm here to support, what everybody's doing.
Yeah, me too. I really appreciate you saying that. Especially it's going to be interesting because there were some really hardcore paleo folks who listen to the show, and I've only had a couple of vegans on, but I'm really excited to have you on. My background is that I was vegetarian and vegan on and off for years. And you had a huge change when you decided to basically make that switch from being sedentary to being one of the 25 fittest men. So can you just describe, I know that a lot of people already know your story, but I'd love for you just to, for those of us who aren't quite familiar with it yet, if you could go through how you made that most ridiculous switch from being sedentary to super fit.
Yeah, it's funny. Thanks. I mean, looking back on it, it all looks like it happened really quickly and sort of like I planned it, but that's not really the reality of how it went down. I mean, it took a couple years and it all just kind of unfolded organically. But really what happened was I'd been a swimmer in college. I swam at Stanford back in the late 1980s. So I'm almost 47 now. So we're talking like 88, 87 around then. But when that was over, that was over. And that was, so went the end of my athletic career. And it was really kind of a career that I felt I never actually realized my potential as an athlete because I had a nasty alcoholism habit that kind of undermined my aspirations at the time, that nagged me for the next 10 years. And by the time I was 31, I was able to get sober. And I spent the next 8 years really trying to repair the wreckage that I had created as a result of my drinking. And so I was very focused on getting back the things that I'd lost, like climbing the corporate ladder. I was a corporate attorney at the time, and repairing my relationships and all that stuff. And the good news is I was able to do all of that and kind of from an outside perspective, really in many respects, like achieve what I thought was like the American dream.
Yeah.
Like I had a good career, I got married, and my wife and I built a house, and it all looked good. But inside of me, I still had this like pit, this like hole in my spirit where I felt like I was missing something, or I wasn't happy, and I kind of felt like I'd been gypped. Like I did everything that I thought, or I'd been told my whole life were the things that I needed to do to be happy, and I had to kind of do it twice because I'd lost it, earlier on. And during the period of this time, I really had overlooked my health and my fitness. Like I was so focused on just, moving up in the world that I was like, I don't have time to work out. Who has time for that? And I basically lived off what a friend of mine calls the window diet. Like if you can roll down your window in the car and they hand it to you, you eat it.
Yeah.
And that's what I did for years and years and years. And those dietary habits really were formed when I was younger as a swimmer, and I'm like training 4 hours a day, and you can just eat everything in sight and it doesn't matter. And you're kind of like bulletproof because you're 19 years old. Right. Sure. And then, denial creeps in where I would look in the mirror and I'd still think like, hey, I'm still that fit Stanford swimmer, not really able to see myself as I really was, which was about 50 pounds overweight. I was like 210 pounds by the time I was 39. So I was never like hugely obese. I was never like a candidate for the Biggest Loser or anything like that, but it was more about like how I felt. Like I was just depressed. I was lethargic. I was a couch potato. I wasn't enthusiastic about anything that was going on in my life. And it all kind of came to a head just before I turned 40. I came home late after working late at night. I stopped at Jack in the Box, picked up a bunch of cheeseburgers, sitting on the couch, watching Law and Order. It's 1 a.m. My family's asleep. My kids are asleep. And I finally make my way up the stairs to go to bed. And I had to pause like halfway up a simple flight of stairs, like out of breath, winded, sweat on my brow, like buckled over, and like tightness in my chest. And I was like, I thought, oh my God, like I'm 39, like I have to, like, I'm winded and, I feel tightness in my chest. Am I going to have a heart attack? Like, what is going on? And it scared me, it was really scary. And heart disease runs in my family. My grandfather, who is my namesake, his name is Richard, also had been a champion swimmer in the 1929, 1930s, was captain of the University of Michigan swim team, stayed fit his whole life, never smoked, was never obese, certainly wasn't eating a Jack in the Box in 1940 or whatever. Yeah. And he died of a heart attack at age 54. So Mom would always say, like, you've got to be careful. He died when she was still in college, and obviously long before I was born. So I had this moment where I realized, like, I really needed to make a change, and not just like a vague notion of, I really ought to go to the gym, or, I really ought to eat better. Because in my experience, like, vague ideas like that have never really worked for me. Like, I knew I needed to do something very decisive and very specific. And that's the only way that I was able to get sober, like having this moment of clarity with that. And it was a similar experience where I realized this is another one of those moments where I have a choice, I have a decision, and I really need to act, because if I just kind of am lazy about it, the moment will pass, and I'll be back to doing whatever I was doing before, happily going along in my denial state. So that was really the beginning. And, it wasn't like I went vegan overnight. Like I played around with a bunch of different things. I did a 7-day fruit and vegetable juice cleanse. And that was really an eye-opening, amazing experience because, I don't know about you, but like I have like a logical mind and I want to understand the science and like, what are the toxins that I'm removing here? And that doesn't really make sense. And how does drinking juice have anything to do with that? But I sort of set aside my idea of what I thought was right because like my best thinking got me into this predicament.
Yeah.
So I just opened up my mind and said, I'm going to try something different. And I did that. And, it was an experience in which the first 2 days I was buckled over on the couch. Like I couldn't move. I felt like I was back in rehab. But by day 3, day 4, day 5, I started to, really feel a lot better. And, by the time I hit 6 days, I couldn't believe how good I felt. I couldn't believe that my body could feel so much better in such a short period of time by just changing a few simple things. And it made me realize just how unbelievably resilient the human body is. That after sort of abusing myself with drugs and alcohol and fast food for so long, that I could feel so dramatically different so quickly.
Yeah.
So that was the first step.
That's so cool. And it's such like an interesting journey as well, going from something that basically it seems like, and correct me if I'm hearing this wrong, but you were eating pretty much whatever you wanted to, which, which is what most of us do. Most Americans anyway, increasingly.
Yes.
But you've switched to, you started with something that's pretty hardcore and you felt terrible at the beginning. Mm-hmm. And then you started feeling awesome, probably better than you ever had. But making that change, like a lot of people experience that right at the beginning when they go from eating a bunch of junk to eating something that's better and nourishing their bodies. They experience that initial feeling of, oh my God, I've never felt this great in my life. But for some reason, it doesn't stick for them. Yet you've been able to stick to probably the most restrictive diet there is, or one of them, aside from like the cabbage soup diet or eating nothing but grapefruit or whatever. You've been able to stick with that for a long time now. Like, what's the mental shift that happens, or how do you encourage other people to be able to maintain this lifestyle?
Right. I mean, just to kind of skip ahead. I mean, from the juice cleanse, then I played around with vegetarianism, and that's a whole story. But then I finally found my way to a plant-based diet and have been on ever since. And I found great results with that, and I've never felt better. And I think to answer your question, it really, it's very difficult to change, and most people don't change unless they're in a sufficient amount of pain. Like pain is the ultimate motivator, right? I know for myself, like I don't change my habits until I'm in enough pain to do so. I happen to be in enough pain to make that change. The way I've been able to stick with it, I think, is a couple things. The first is that you can't underestimate the power of momentum. Like once you start to make these changes, even if they're small little baby steps towards something bigger over time, that you do create a lot of momentum around that. And the more momentum you have, then it becomes easier to kind of stick with it. Mm-hmm. I don't look at what I eat as restrictive at all. Like I relish what I eat.
Yeah.
And I've been able to overcome cravings that really held me prisoner to poor choices for a long time. But the way I was able to break those craving cycles was really to weather the uncomfortable storm of freeing myself from them. Mm-hmm. So, for example, when I stopped eating meat, that really wasn't that big of a deal for me. I didn't miss it that much. I didn't have huge cravings. And now, of course, if I smell barbecue or something like that, like I'm a human being, I go, oh, that smells good. That probably tastes pretty good. Cheese was very difficult for me. I had a couple of weeks where I had a really hard time, like getting off the dairy and the cheese, and also to realize how much dairy is in so much of the foods that we eat, particularly packaged foods and processed foods. So it was hard. I'm not going to lie. Like I had maybe 3 weeks where it was, I didn't know if I was going to make it, but I was able to, like, if there's one thing I understand, it's like how to weather a detox. Like I've done that many times and my struggles with drug addiction and alcohol. So that's familiar territory for me. And I knew enough to know if I could get to the other side of that I could free myself. And now I don't think about it that much. And I think that that's a big thing. Like I know that sort of having cheat days is really popular with certain diets, like the slow carb diet or what have you. And if people can do that, like, more power to them. But for me, I just know myself well enough to know that if I was allowed to eat a cheeseburger one day a week, that I would spend my whole week thinking about, what I was going to eat on that cheat day.
Yeah.
And I would remain a prisoner to that craving, which would be driving my thinking and my behavior. And so for me, it's just better to let go of it all completely. And now I don't really think about it. So I don't think of myself as depriving myself.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear that leaf blower out there? Sorry about that.
It's all good.
So I don't think of myself as depriving myself of any of that. And I think the other thing that really has been helpful is another tool that I learned in recovery, which I think is maybe the most important tool, which is to just stay rooted in what you're doing right now. Stay in the present moment.
Mm-hmm.
What are you going to eat today? What are you going to eat for your next meal? What are you going to eat in your next hour? And focus on just making that next right choice, and not worry about, oh my God, I got to go to this this work dinner in a month, and we're going to go to a steakhouse, or we're going to go to some place where I can't eat what I want to eat, or I have to go to this bachelor party or whatever it is. And you start living in this future event that hasn't occurred yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that trips people up. It's just like, what's in front of you to do right now? What's the choice you're going to make in the immediate moment?
Yeah. And you figure it out. Like, a lot of sticking to a nutritional protocol is being great at improvising and coming up with solutions on the spot, because that always happens. Like traveling, bachelor parties, someone cooks you something that they don't even realize you wouldn't eat in the first place. It's just it's a vast exercise in trying to figure out what to do right now. But go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. I was going to say, so sometimes you got to plan ahead a little bit. It's not that big of a deal. You just do a little extra preparation, like, oh, I'm going to be in an airport all day. Like, I better bring something to eat with me. Or it's also an exercise in creating healthy boundaries. Like, hey, like, if somebody's telling me, like, I'm at somebody's house and they're going to say, you need to eat this or whatever, like, where is that dividing line between you sort of sticking up for yourself and you, like, doing what somebody else wants you to do because you want them to like you or what have you. You want to be polite. And how do you navigate that politically, so that you're not like you don't end up coming off like about it, but you're just still sort of being true to what you need for yourself.
Right. So how did you do that when you made that shift with tact, or was it without tact maybe at the beginning?
Well, no, I mean, I've been learning as I go, and I still continue to learn. I don't know that I have all the answers to it, and every day presents new circumstances. I mean, I have the good fortune of living in Los Angeles, where it's pretty easy, and everybody's some kooky diet, wherever you go. And I'm married. I have 4 kids. My wife is an amazing cook, and when I got on board with this, she got on board, and she's always coming up with awesome stuff in the kitchen. So that makes it easy. And there's a lot of restaurant options in Los Angeles that make it easy. So I haven't had to kind of suffer through the challenges that somebody who is in, someplace different than where I live has to face. Like if you're in Oklahoma City or somewhere else, it might be a little bit more difficult. And I'm empathetic to that. It's possible. And there's certainly plenty of tools and online resources to make it easier for you. But I also understand that it does require some, kind of delicate, interpersonal, kind of tiptoeing at times.
Yeah. And shifting gears a little bit, just given the sheer amount of energy that you require to perform at the level of activity that you're at, how do you fuel? What does a plate or a meal look like for you?
Well, it's an interesting question, and it continues to evolve. I would say that, just as a kind of foundational thing that a lot of people say to me, oh, well, you went off and did all these crazy ultra endurance races, despite being on this plant-based diet.
Right.
And my response is always like, no, actually, like, I would have never done this stuff had I not changed my diet. It was the energy that I got from beginning to eat this way that actually gave me the energy and the inspiration to go out and attack these things. I think at the same time, in the first, maybe year and a half of eating this way, even though my body was performing really well, I lost the weight. Every workout I would get stronger and faster. Like the improvements that I were realizing were remarkable. Still in the back of my mind, I had this like doubt. I'm thinking, well, everything's going well in my training, but still, like, I don't know. I've been told my whole life that I need to eat meat to be strong, and I need, dairy for strong bones. And those marketing messages are very, very powerful. And I was kind of at war with that. And so I would go out and I'd get all these supplements, that I would go to all this. I had a whole cabinet full of supplements, and I thought I needed all those things. In the last couple of years, I've been weaning myself off of those to see, are these making any difference? What do I need? What do I don't? And I don't really take very many supplements at all anymore. I take a plant-based protein powder occasionally. I take vitamin B12. I take glutamine once in a while, some cordyceps, some things like that. But I don't do a lot of that. And in terms of what I eat, as I've developed a greater level of efficiency with my endurance training, the cycling, and the running, I've noticed that my appetite has gone down because my body has adapted so well to the training load, to the volume, that I don't need to eat as much as I used to eat when I was in the beginning stages of this journey. So although my caloric intake is going to be higher than the average person, it's not as high as you might think, even though I'm out training 25 hours a week or what have you. So breakfast is a Vitamix smoothie with lots of dark leafy greens and some fruit in there, and maybe some chia seeds or ground flax seeds and some spirulina. It's not, I don't have any one recipe. A lot of times it's just what I happen to have in the fridge and in the cupboard that day. Then that's usually enough to go out and train in the morning. And if I'm doing a long bike ride, then I try to eat whole foods along the way, like some dates or some almond butter or some bananas. And I try to keep it real simple. I try to avoid the sugary gels and the Gatorade drinks and all that kind of stuff. Like I've really weaned myself off of all of that kind of thing. And when I get back, it's just like any other workout. And it depends on how hot it was and how long I went and how the intensity level and all that kind of thing. But, it's the principles are the same. You got to replenish your electrolytes. So I'll have some coconut water and some water. I'll make sure I do that right away. I will. And then you got to replenish your glycogen stores. So I'll do another smoothie, and this one will be maybe a little bit more fruit-based than the one I had in the morning. And then I'll have, maybe an hour later, I'll have some rice with vegetables, or I'll have some lentils, which are high in protein, or some quinoa with vegetables, or a veggie burrito, or, a lentil-based veggie burger, or maybe just a big salad, depending on that.
Yeah.
And then I'll snack on some nuts throughout the day and some fruit and things like that. And I basically have like a normal dinner as well.
That's so cool. And one thing that constantly comes up is the amount of love that's lost between the two communities, vegans and paleo people. And paleo has really subsumed a lot of other movements like farm to table and slow food and even the slow carb diet. In a lot of cases, they've kind of gravitated toward that thing. But the running joke that I have is that my diet is 70% vegan. And a lot of times it's even more than that, because it's, even though, a lot of people would say I'm paleo-ish, it's really, it's far more about eating real food than any particular dietary paradigm. And what I'm hearing from the foods that you're eating, I mean, it's pretty similar to what we're doing. Why is there so much love lost?
It's a great, I'm glad that you raised it, because if you didn't, I was going to.
Yeah.
And I think that there's a lot of energy behind, let's get the paleo people and the vegans in a room and let them fight it out to the death or something like that. And I've had people trying to push me to do that. You probably have had the same. And
totally.
I don't really find that to be productive or in service to, the sort of message that I think either of us is trying to put out. And, even within the sort of plant-based community, there are factions beneath that argue amongst themselves about, should you eat 4 nuts or 6 nuts, or is coconut oil bad or is it good, or the fruitarians and the no oil and all that kind of stuff. And those are they're all valid conversations to have, but at times you can lose the forest for the trees. And because the truth of the matter is, we're in a huge healthcare crisis. Obesity rates are through the roof. 1 out of every 2 Americans is going to suffer from heart disease. By 2030, 50% of Americans are going to be diabetic or pre-diabetic. Like these statistics are insane, and most people are eating at McDonald's. So when guys like you and me start to fight, then all that does is keep people wedded to their poor choices, because they say, well, these guys can't even get along. What's going on? So I think that true paleo really has a lot more in common with a vegan diet than people realize.
Yeah.
I think that there is a perversion that occurs with some kind of perspectives on paleo that turn it into this, sort of bacon fanaticism that I don't think paleo really is about, where we're like, suddenly it's about eating bacon for all your meals. And I don't really believe that is paleo, but people misinterpret it and then think that that's what they should do every day. And, I think that the true paleo really is a lot more plant-based than people realize. And I find more value in, something like you and I getting on the horn like we're doing right now and having an adult conversation. And we may disagree on some of the details here and there, but our goal is the same. And I'm not one to tell you that what you're doing is wrong. And, what I'm doing is agreeing with me. And, I believe in a plant-based message. And I think a lot of people are just, there's power in just the idea that people should understand that you can still be a successful athlete on a plant-based diet. And for a lot of people, that's like radical and revolutionary, know? So I understand that not everyone is going to want to go plant-based, but if I can go 100% plant-based and go off and do some crazy stuff like I've done, that somebody will look at me and go, well, if that guy can do that, then I can at least move in that direction, 20% or 50% or what have you.
Yeah, I love that. And there is such a big difference between, someone who's getting their breakfast from Quiznos thinking that it's healthy, one of the, whatever they're calling healthy these days. I don't even know. I don't pay attention to that stuff anymore, but whatever the commercials are shouting at you, that is just fundamentally different than what most paleo people are eating and what most vegan people are eating. And if you did it in a Venn diagram, there would be so much overlap between those second two groups. But yet, like you said, there's that infighting, and even a lot of the leaders as well are somewhat guilty of this. And I can relate as well to the whole like bacon fanaticism. It's such a like joke, and we turn it into our own joke, right? Like about eating loads of bacon, putting it in chocolate and on your car, on your body, anything like that. It's just because it's so preposterous. And I think the genesis of that is that we've been told that things like butter and bacon and coconut oil and avocados and other things that are fatty or have saturated fat would kill us and give us heart disease for so long. And now it's kind of this like, like we can eat bacon and still be healthy type thing that I think the paleo people have going on. And it's kind of problematic though, because if we want this message to go mainstream, and I think vegans and paleo people can agree, we need to focus on the real message, which is, I think the real message is that it all starts with plants, not that it all starts with bacon or meat or anything like that. And if you ask most people, especially the leaders of the paleo ancestral movement, what are the fundamentals to this dietary regimen, it would be, we should be eating in the way that humans used to be eating in a natural world. It's not like going to McDonald's and just ordering 6 patties without the buns. Like some people, and I think the main problem, like PR problem with both vegans and paleo, is that it's a joke to the rest of the world, right? Mm-hmm. So how is the vegan community addressing that? How do you take this message of health and push it into the mainstream?
From the vegan point of view, you mean, or
yeah,
plant-based message? Well, I think that a couple things. I mean, everybody, every kind of sort of health proponent in the vegan or plant-based community has a different strategy for that, and their personality, lends itself to a different presentation. I mean, on the one extreme, you have guys like Durian Rider, and like I don't know if you know who he is, but
I do.
He's very
he hasn't attacked me yet, for all I know, but we'll see.
But, he's very. I just interviewed him last night for my podcast, and he loves the controversy, and whereas like I'm more about trying to build a bridge, and I'm trying to think about the average person who might not tune into a vegan related podcast, but might tune into yours and might be open to the idea of thinking about things a little bit more differently. And the truth of the matter is, whether you're paleo, whatever you're doing, you're probably not eating enough plants in your diet. And I'm not an anthropologist, so I can't testify to how we actually used to eat. I would imagine that it had a lot to do with where you lived. I mean, if you're an Inuit Eskimo, you're going to eat differently than a guy who's living on the Great Plains, right? But I think that for the most part, I would have to imagine that plant foods were more readily accessible than animal foods. Animal foods required a lot of energy to track and kill, and I would imagine would be a luxury to eat. And those animals were probably not very fatty. So the animals that were being eaten at that time were very different than the animals we're eating now, whether they're grass-fed or factory farmed. And what's happened is we've just gotten so far away from what's natural, right?
Yeah.
You go to the grocery store and suddenly, every grocery store is the size of Walmart. And why is that? It's not because they're selling more apples and lettuce. It's because every aisle in the middle is packed with these processed foods.
Yeah.
Crazy amounts of processed foods. That's what we're eating. And, if people want to learn more about like what's behind all that, they should read a book called Salt, Sugar, Fat, which I don't know if you've read that book, but it kind of goes into the big food industry and how they spend a lot of money and science to specifically devise foods that activate the pleasure centers in our brain. And that creates an addictive response that keeps us going back, much in the way that tobacco companies kind of manipulated their product to enhance the addictive nature of the cigarettes that they were selling. And there's a lot of parallels there. So when you start to look into this stuff, then you start to feel like you're some crazy radical conspiracy theorist. Yeah. But you really have to look at who's profiting from these marketing messages that we're being bombarded with everywhere we go, whether it's the poster for drinking milk in the high school gymnasium, or the label on the Snickers bar that's the big statement on the side of the Snickers bar that says it has 5 grams of protein, as if it's a health food or something like that. So it's incumbent upon everybody to educate themselves, learn how to read a nutrition facts label, and ask the hard questions and empower yourself so you can make a better choice for your health.
Yeah. So one of the, this is so fascinating, and that's a great read also for any of you who haven't read that, check that book out. But so one of the things that I've noticed, and there's been a lot of talk about this recently in the paleo community, is you walk into a place like Whole Foods and it's kind of problematic. Even though paleo has been growing exponentially in terms of popularity, it's been tough for people to develop products around it. It's been tough for these food marketers to get in there and be like, slap a label on it and be like, this is paleo, buy this because you're paleo. Because it's difficult to do that with proteins and a lot of fats. But when it comes to taking carbs and marketing those, like a lot of things are vegan just because they don't have something in it, right? So you see this explosion of a lot of companies that are saying this food is vegan or gluten-free. This is another, they've caught on to that. There's a lot of junk food that's gluten-free. What do you recommend to folks who are out there in this minefield? How do you navigate that and get away from those super processed, vegan or plant-based foods that are absolute junk?
Well, it's pretty simple. I mean, I think you just buy whole foods. You buy real food. You try to buy most of your foods that don't have a nutrition facts label on it, and then you look at the nutrition facts label, and if it has things on it that you can't pronounce or you don't know what they are, then there's a good chance that that's probably not an optimal choice for you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's really, in the most general sense, what people should begin with. And I think that if they started to wrap their brain around the idea of getting a lot more vegetables in their diet, if people did one thing different, which is to start their day with a blended drink of spinach and kale and fruit. I mean, I don't know, we may disagree on some of these things, but like if you did, instead of having waffles or pancakes for breakfast or something like just make one simple change and then pay attention to how you feel. I mean, I think what people say to me all the time is, what do you eat? What do you eat before you work out? What do you eat during your work? What do you eat after? And I'm like, well, I can tell you all of that, but you have to figure these things out for yourself. And that means that you have to take personal responsibility for your choices. It's not about a guru or what I say or what Abel says or whatever. You have to do that for yourself. And that involves developing a greater relationship with yourself. It means being able to pay attention and monitor how certain foods are making you feel and adjusting your diet accordingly to maximize your energy levels and your vitality.
Yeah, I love it. And I love that you said that too, because our advice is so similar, or what we, when people come to us and they're just like, what should I eat for breakfast? Generally, I'll say, instead of pushing all this stuff out, instead of saying, well, don't eat an Egg McMuffin, it's put something in there that is a healthy habit, that gives you momentum, like you were talking about before. And what I say there is a green smoothie with lots of dark leafy greens and some fruit, and usually some flax and chia. And if people just take that one step and do it daily, or somewhat daily, a few times a week, you'll find that all this junk, or a lot of this junk, is completely pushed out because you feel so great that you're not all of a sudden reaching for the Oreos or the other nonsense that's just around. You just don't need it anymore.
Right. And there's another thing that's kind of interesting, and it gets kind of technical, but it's becoming a more popular kind of scientific inquiry that's going on right now, which is this idea of the microbial ecology in your GI tract, and how important that is in terms of maintaining your overall health. But also there's evidence to suggest that it's impactful in terms of your cravings, right? So you have like 10 times the number of microbes in your gut than you have cells in your entire body. And maintaining proper health with this microbial ecology is critical to your health. And when you take in, I talk about this in my book a little bit. So when you take in foods that aren't good for you, you're changing that microbial ecology. You're putting microbes in that are different from the foods that you're eating. Those start to propagate, and then those microbes are starting to demand more of that kind of food because they require that kind of food to live. So, for example, the example I always use is Morgan Spurlock in Super Size Me, which I'm sure you saw that movie, right? Most people have seen that movie. So I don't know if you remember, but so for those who don't know, this guy decides he's going to eat nothing but McDonald's for 30 days and see what happens. And prior to that, he's living with his girlfriend who's a vegan chef. He's eating a pretty clean diet. So this is a pretty radical departure from him. So first couple days, he's eating McDonald's. Like, he's on day 3, and it's starting to catch up to him. And it's literally making him sick. There's one scene where he drinks a milkshake, and he has to throw up out of the window of his car. It's so gross, right? And he's just like, I'm never going to make it. How am I going to do this? And then you fast forward like 2 weeks later, and you see him getting out of bed, and he's like, I have a headache. I feel horrible. Like, I can't think straight. And then he goes to McDonald's for his breakfast, and he gets his sausage McMuffin or whatever it is that he eats. And then he's like, I feel awesome. Like, suddenly he feels good. Like he's developed this addiction to this food where he doesn't feel good until he eats it. And I would submit that a big part of that is because the microbial ecology in his gut has changed. He's replaced his healthy microbial ecology with this ecology that thrives on McDonald's food. And there's the leaf blower again, of course.
There it is.
But now he needs that in order to feel good. And so if you extrapolate that idea out, there's actually studies that say that people that are addicted to chocolate, like just can't stop eating chocolate, have a different microbial ecology than people that can take or leave chocolate. And so when you start to think of it in those terms, it's kind of a trip, because you think that you are your thoughts and that you're controlling your mind and you have domain over these things. But then you realize, wow, these things in my gut actually are playing a role in what it is that I'm craving. Well, let me eat a bunch of really healthy food, a bunch of vegetables and plants and dark leafy greens and all this kind of stuff. And over time, you'll start to crave those foods. Why? Because you have replaced your microbial ecology with a healthier version.
Yeah, and that lends to momentum, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course.
It really does.
Here's the thing. We all know what's not good for us and what's good for us, for the most part, right? Like, we can argue a bit, quibble over certain things, but why do we keep making the bad choice? It's like there's that powerless moment where we just instinctively grab it, or the car finds its way driving into the drive-through, no matter what our brain is telling us. Mm-hmm. So it's like, how do we override that? How do we overcome that addictive knee-jerk response? And if you can master that, then you're free.
Yeah. So I would love to ask you more about this, just because of your personal experience. You've been addicted to alcohol in your past, and you were also
still.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Once addicted, always addicted.
But for a lot of people, they argue that a food addiction is just as, or maybe even more powerful than, addiction to alcohol or certain drugs or what have you, behaviors in some cases. What would you have to say to someone who says that they and are absolutely convinced that they are addicted to bad food?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think first of all, that word gets thrown around like,
Yeah.
Sort of nonchalantly, like, oh, well, I can't do that. I'm addicted to cheese or whatever. And
Sure.
it's not a very casual sense. And I'm like, well, are you really addicted? Or it's just, that's an easy way to say like, no, I'm not interested in being healthy. So the first question is it truly something you are powerless over, or are you just kind of being a puss,
Yeah.
So, and there's a difference. So some people they just don't want to change, and they're not willing to get uncomfortable a little bit. Like, because if you want something good in your life, you have to sacrifice a little bit for it. I mean, that's the reality. Like, good things come at a price. So, but then there's the person who truly is powerless and has a really hard time and has done everything and can't overcome it. And so I think the first thing to do is to kind of flip your perspective. Instead of looking at it from a perspective of, I can't eat this or I need to get rid of this, shift your focus on what you can eat. Start eating healthier things. And I think the more that you start to do that, it's like we were talking about earlier, you will begin to shift those cravings. And if you're willing to get uncomfortable for a number of days or maybe even a number of weeks and really deprive yourself of that one thing that you're craving, and you embrace the suffering that very well may come with that, I can guarantee you that you will get onto the other side of it. And then that, like I said earlier, then you really can free yourself of it. But you do have to change your microbes. You've got to reprogram your thoughts and rewire those cemented pathways in your brain that are messaging you to grab that thing that is not serving you. So yeah, it's possible. It's not just possible, it's very, very doable, but you have to make the commitment.
Yeah. And it's not something that you're powerless over in most cases, even if you think you are.
Mm-hmm.
For alcoholics, there's obviously a community there. I'm sure you've talked to a lot of people about your experience and their experience as it relates to that. Are there best practices that you can pull from people who have had success and been able to kick these negative habits out of their lives? Is there something you can pull from there and apply to food?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the principles that I apply to my diet are really just things that I learned in recovery. They're very powerful principles, not just for sort of dealing with a drug or alcohol addiction, but they're like rules for life that I think are very powerful and effective. And I mean, the first and foremost one is the one I already mentioned of just sort of staying in the day or staying in the moment of what you're doing. I think that's huge. And I think the other thing is being compassionate toward yourself, and I think that, in recovery, it's like, it's very black and white. You're either like drinking and using drugs or you're not. There's no like middle ground where you can do a little bit,
Yeah.
So it's different with food because you have to eat, right? So contextually, it's you have to take a different approach. And I think what happens with people that trips them up is they set themselves up for failure because they try to do it perfect right out of the gate. So whether you're trying to adopt a plant-based diet, or it doesn't matter what diet it is, paleo diet, whatever it is, people will say, okay, I'm going to do this. They're a week in or they're 2 weeks in, and then they have a weak moment, and their face is buried in the Ben and Jerry's or whatever. And then they go, well, that's too hard. I can't do it. Like, I failed. I failed. And then they just throw the baby out with the bathwater and go back to what they're doing, saying it was too difficult. And I think a better, healthier approach is to be compassionate toward yourself and say, okay, I did that. Like, let's look at what led to that. That was interesting. It's not a big deal. So I had some ice cream. So let's adjust. Like, let me look at the triggers that led me towards that. How can I approach it better next time? And just move forward, and give yourself permission. Like, it's okay, And I think that happens with vegans a lot because they eat meat or they eat dairy or something like that in a short period after time. And then they say, well, it's too hard. Whereas it's a process. We have to acclimate to a new way of eating. No matter what that new way is, your body needs to adapt to that. And it involves you not being so hard on yourself in the process.
Yeah. And as time goes by, it's so cool. One thing that definitely happened to me was food that used to draw me in, walking down the middle aisles of the grocery store, for example, all those processed junks, chips, cookies, popcorn, the rest of it. That's just, full of GMOs, fake food, chemicals, all this stuff. To me, that doesn't look like food anymore. It doesn't draw me in. I don't feel an emotional response at all when I see that stuff, because it's just something that is foreign to me now.
But how did you get to that place? Like, how did you go from where you were powerless, you just had to grab the popcorn or whatever it is, to the place that you're at now?
I think it's really about what you were talking about. It's about that change within your body, whether it's your gut, which definitely plays into it, or how everything works together. What I really think it is more your subconscious. We think that we have so much control over our willpower and habits, but what really controls it is the subconscious. How are you existing in your own environment, and what is the mental game that you're playing with yourself, right? When you do something for a long period of time, it becomes who you are, part of your identity. So part of my identity is not eating Doritos. And so when that becomes not just a choice that you're making, but a part of you, you don't have to make that choice anymore. And that's kind of cool, because then you retain that willpower to be able to do an ridiculous endurance event or something else that allows you to achieve something positive instead of using all of your willpower to not do something negative.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, because, when you start, your identity is, I'm the guy who eats Doritos, and it's impossible for me to stop eating them. And you have to understand that you may think that that's true, but that's just a story that you're telling yourself, that you're putting energy behind. And you have a choice to tell a different story.
I love that. That's so cool. I can't believe it, but we're just about out of time. Rich, before we go, why don't you tell folks, number one, about your awesome podcast? I encourage everyone to check it out. I've listened to it for a while. It's always on the top charts, close to mine and Jillian's, unfortunately. But
it's usually a notch or two below Abel's show, but not too hard to find. It's the Rich Roll podcast. And much like your show, it's similar. I do long form interviews with all kinds of people. I've had doctors, nutritionists, world-class athletes, entrepreneurs, and the sort of consistent theme, although, I'm a plant-based guy, I have all different kinds of people on. I'd love for you to come on the show.
Thank you. I would love that.
We have a long-winded, mature conversation about health and wellness in general. And a lot of it goes beyond food into, how can the real theme is, how can we access and unleash a better, more authentic version of ourselves onto the world? And that's my goal. And so, it's been a lot of fun. When did you start yours?
We're coming up on it'll be 2 years in February.
Oh, wow, 2 years. Yeah. So I started mine in December. So I'm a little bit newer to the game, but I'm having a lot of fun. And the best part about it is, I get to meet really cool people and sit down and have a long conversation with them. And, how often do we get to do that in this day and age?
I love it.
It's been cool.
And where else can people find you? Obviously, Rich Roll, the podcast on iTunes, but what else are you working on?
So I have, you can go to my website, which is richroll.com. That's where I host the podcast, and I've got a blog there and a lot of other information about what I'm doing. I've got some products. I've got the downloadable e-cookbook, and you can see all that stuff there. For people that are interested in learning more about how to eat a plant-based diet, even if you're paleo and you just want to figure out how to get more plants into your diet, I recently launched a online course called The Ultimate Guide to Plant-Based Nutrition, which you can find on Mind Body Green. It's like 3.5 hours of video content with an online community, and production value is really high. It's really cool. All the videos are broken up into like 5 or 10 minute little segments that are very subject specific. So people can check that out. And I'm on Twitter at Rich Roll. And I've been traveling around doing a bunch of speaking gigs. So you can if you follow me on Twitter, I usually tweet like where I'm going to be and stuff like that. So yeah, that's basically, I'm on Facebook and all the other usual places.
Yeah. You're not hard to find these days.
Yeah.
Instagram. Awesome. Well, Rich, thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. I know that a lot of people have been really interested in hearing a paleo talk to a vegan or a plant-based person. Yeah. And hopefully we didn't disappoint them with the lack of fireworks or anything like that.
Yeah, we can get in a fight. Should we go? Should we take them out with a fight?
Maybe we should start a fight. I have a bone to pick with you, Rich.
Okay, cool. No, I appreciate the time. Oh, I forgot. I did write a book. I should be better at promoting.
Yeah, there you go.
I like wrote a book, and I forgot to even mention I have a book. So yeah, I have a book called Finding Ultra. It's really just inspirational memoir of my story. There's a lot of plant-based nutrition stuff in there, but it's really, if you want to just read a story of personal transformation and kind of how I went from where I was to doing the crazy endurance races that I've done, which we didn't even get into, you can check that out. It's on Amazon and wherever you buy books. So.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, Rich, thank you so much once again for coming on. I know a lot of people will love this, and you're welcome anytime.
All right. Thanks, Abel. I appreciate it. I love what you're doing, and I can't wait to get you on my show.
Thanks, man.
All right. Cool. Peace.
Peace.